Now, throughout all this mini console craze, I have not made any videos or speculative videos or anything like that. This is the very first one, even though despite the fact that I am a fan of these for the most part. I have an NES one, a Super NES one, and an NES one. I rarely ever hook them up. Why would I? I got the actual consoles and the games. All I ever need, except for Star Fox 2, obviously. I skipped out on the PlayStation one because, well, let's face it, that was a dumpster fire, and thanks to videos, I was able to not waste my money on it. Now onto the Sega Game Gear. Now, this was a tweet sent out and an article sent out by readretro.com. I will put the link down there at the bottom. As of right now, it looks like they're going to be trying to release this thing late 2019. It says third quarter, so August, September, October. So in that range, it looks like we're going to be getting this thing. As of now, we know that there are going to be 40 games installed onto this, but they've only announced 5 so far. Sonic the Hedgehog, of course, I mean, that's a staple and a given. We got Streets of Rage, which I'm super happy about. I hope they actually include Streets of Rage 2. That would be awesome. Dynamite Headdy, which is a classic. So far, list has been great. So far, the list is a lot better than the PlayStation Classic. Next, we have Crystal Warriors, which I've never played. Don't know if it's good or not, but I imagine it is if they're going to be announcing it like this. And of course, we got Columns, which I really like. Columns is one of my favorite puzzle games. So, and that's their version of Tetris, essentially. You know, whenever I got the Game Boy, and their puzzle game of choice was Tetris. Whenever somebody got the Game Gear, it was Columns, and I'm pretty sure it came with Columns. So there you go. Now, the system itself is supposed to be a little bit smaller, which I don't know. I can go either way. I've never really had a problem with the size of the Game Gear. It fits comfortably in my hands, but then again, I have giant monster, behemoth, Sasquatch hands. So maybe it's better for me, and most people would rather have a smaller case, which is fine. I don't know, when it comes to like the Game Boy Advance, and my hands are like right here, it's very crampy. I don't know if anyone else experiences that, but for me, it's very, very crampy. I've never had that problem with the Sega Game Gear. It's almost like a Wii pad, essentially, but the screen on this is 3 inches across, measured diagonally. The screen on the Mini is supposed to be slightly bigger at 3.4 inches, so it should come out to about this outer border, I guess, would roughly be about 3.25 inches, 3.25. I'm really fine with, because honestly, I've never had a problem with the screen size on the original Game Gear. What I did have a problem with, and it's not. And it's, I think, a product of being used to seeing screens nowadays, these really nice LCD screens and very crisp, very sharp images. When you go back and play something like the Game Gear, and you see how just muddied, very, very, very muddied the screen looked on these things, which you can't fault them. You know, they did the best with they could with the technology that they had, and that's fine. But it'd be kind of cool to play it on a really nice, sharp screen, which obviously this new Mini would have. It's using newer technology. Although I will say that there is a little bit of a charm in playing something the way it was originally meant to be played. And as stupid as it sounds, sometimes I actually go back to playing. I have this big, giant behemoth of a console television that doesn't have RCA inputs. It only has RF. And sometimes I will actually hook up my NES and play a few games through the RF, because that's how I originally played the Nintendo. We didn't have, that's what we had. We had a console TV with only RF. So my first experience at my grandfather's house playing Super Mario Brothers was on that TV with a really snowy, muddied picture, and not that crisp, sharp pixels that we get these days. And it's a bit of a, I don't know, it's a bit of a nostalgia trip. I'll just do that sometimes, because that's how I originally played it. You know, and it's more fuzzy memories, I guess, more than anything. So I don't think that actually, you know, this Mini would replace a Sega Game Gear, especially since, you know, we don't know if we're going to be able to load ROMs on the thing, and I still have a lot of Game Gear carts. I'm still going to have a Sega Game Gear. Eventually, I'm going to get one of these. I'm going to take one of these to a con and see if somebody can replace the capacitors, resistors. And because I do have a lot of games, I run across the games a lot. I've run across a lot of the games on Game Chasers. Some of them are really good ones too. And so I really want to have this. But the Mini, great little novelty item to have too. Other things that the article talks about is the fact that it is obviously on a rechargeable battery, charged with USB, which everything's charged with a USB nowadays. No problem with that. And they actually make a joke about how the original Sega Game Gear batteries lasted 30 minutes, and it really does. It really did seem like that one time I actually used batteries with it. Nowadays, when I was using the only Game Gear that actually worked, I was hooking it up via a power adapter. But I can see where the Sega Game Gear would absolutely just drain batteries and drive your parents crazy because they have to keep repurchasing batteries. That's the gift that keeps on giving, or I should say the gift that keeps on hitting you in your wallet, the Sega Game Gear. Now, anyone who knows me knows that I grew up mostly a Nintendo fan. I didn't play as much of the Genesis or the Sega stuff as a lot of people. But one console I do enjoy when I do get the opportunity to play it is the Genesis and the Sega Game Gear. The problem is, and this is a problem that is pretty common actually, is they don't work half the time. In fact, I was actually talking to somebody who really wanted to get a Game Gear and play Sonic the Hedgehog because they used to do it as a kid. And I was like, well, sure, yeah, I got Game Gears. And then I realized, yeah, I have 4 Game Gears, but none of them work. Okay, and I'm holding them right here. Every one of these I found out in the wild, and they don't work. None of them. And it's a pretty common problem. What happens is the capacitors go out, or is it the resistors? I don't know. They used cheap products in this time period in the 90s. In terms of capacitors or resistors, I don't know which one it is. I'm just going to say both. But anyway, it's very common. This happened with the a lot of electronics, but Game Gear is very, very, very susceptible to it, and they just don't work. In fact, in all my years of game chasing, I've run across one Sega Game Gear in the wild, and trust me, I run across a lot of Sega Game Gears. I mean, they're everywhere. They're like bricks. Okay. But I've only run across one that actually worked when I took it home. And guess what? That was a few years ago, and it's one of these, and it doesn't work anymore. So it's died in the last 3 or 4 years or whatever. That sucks, and it's not an expensive fix. You can get somebody in there to go in there and replace the capacitors, resistors for relatively cheap, but I just hadn't gotten around to it. And now comes the speculative part. Not that this whole video hasn't been speculative because it's not official yet. What games do you want to see on it? Well, me personally, I would love to see, as I said, Streets of Rage 2, my favorite Streets of Rage game. I would also like to see a bunch of the Disney games that Sega was really, really known for. I have a few of them. I have Donald Duck on Sega Game Gear. Great game. In Castle of Illusion, great game. I'd love to see those things installed on this. I've actually started to become more of a fan of the Shinobi games over the years. Never played any of them growing up, but I'm actually starting to really enjoy them. So Shinobi 2 Silent Fury, which was actually, I believe, exclusively released on the Game Gear, that would be awesome to have on here as well. So I could play that for the first time because I've never actually run across the cart. I would like to also see Master of Darkness, which I've never played. Very, very hard to find. I'm not even sure if it was released in North America on Game Gear. I think it was on Master System, but I even might be wrong about that. But it is, I've never run across that. Not even in the game store have I ever run across it. It's super expensive. And I would just love to play it because it is extremely very inspired by Castlevania. At the end of the article, they actually say something I was thinking about myself before I even got to that part. I think it would be really cool if they released some games on this thing that we never got in North America. And I know that really wouldn't matter much to people that got these games like in Japan or PAL regions or whatever, but for us Americans, that we got shafted on a lot of good stuff that came out in all these other regions for a lot of times. But I would really enjoy seeing a lot of games that I wouldn't necessarily be able to get over here on cart form. Things like Psychic World, which was released in Japan. So I think that would be really, really super cool if they did that. So anyway, that's it. I know I rambled on a lot in this video, but that's because we don't have a whole lot of information to go on. And hopefully we'll be getting some more information about this soon enough. And hopefully this is not one big giant troll and this is actually happening. Otherwise I'm going to look like an idiot, which I probably already look like an idiot anyway, so it doesn't matter. But this was exciting enough to actually get me out of bed and make this video, which I never do. I never get out of bed and do anything immediately because it takes a few hours for my brain to start actually functioning. But I wanted to do this video. I wanted to actually throw it out there. I hadn't seen anybody else talk about this, and I wanted to, I'll be honest with you, I want to be the first one to talk about it. It's as simple as that. And it's something I actually want to talk about, which a lot of times I can talk about something for the first time, but if I don't actually care about it, I'm not going to do it. This I actually cared about. I thought it was a pretty cool story, and I'm excited for this thing to come out. So I want to hear what your games, or what your games, I want to hear what you actually want to see on this system, what games you would like to see installed, and see if you're excited about it, or see if, you know, maybe you're not as excited about it, because it really kind of depends on who's making this thing, right?